So it's 1933 and two momentous things occur. One is the opening in a small market town in the northwest of England of the Ormskirk campus of Edge Hill College that had until then been based in Liverpool. And also that same autumn, classic movie King Kong arrived at the cinemas. So did the female teacher training students from Edge Hill see the King Kong film? Well, they could have done, because it was on at the Futurist cinema in Liverpool, a beautiful cinema. The frontage lasted until fairly frequently, and they had an amazing advert luring people in, warning them they had to come early to see the amazing movie and so on. They could even have seen, the same autumn, King Clunk, a cartoon takeoff of King Kong produced by rival studio Universal. So all of that's a roundabout way to lead into saying, here is a Giant Ape-ril video. So this is a event I devised, a reading event for stuff about King Kong, other giant apes, other giant beasts. Basically an oversized monster reading time, because why not? And there are co-hosts for this. There's Duncan at Back Away from the Donkey. There's Annie at Obscure Book Adventures, and some other folks joining in as well, which is cool. And some people are kind of using it in a modular kind of way as part of old school April and or Spring into Adventure. So in terms of what I've been reading, there it is, yes. I thought I'd start by reading the King Kong sort of earliest adaptation, but it turned out there are multiple adaptations. So, right, 1933, movie. The thing starts as a movie with a complicated writing history, which I won't really attempt to get into. I would direct you, run, don't walk, to Andrew's video on It Came From the Page, where he gets into all of this, and it's really interesting stuff. I've learned to appreciate the contribution of Ruth Rose, the screenwriter who was perhaps one of the last to be involved in turning the idea into the movie that is now become this major classic, including her being the writer of the classic end line. So skip over if you want zero spoilers. Oh no, it wasn't the airplanes, it was Beauty Killed the Beast. So It Was Beauty Killed the Beast came from Ruth Rose. But not really going to talk too much about the movie. I've talked about that before. The novelisation actually came out prior to the release of the movie. Not unusual. I think the idea of novelisations as publicity for a film kind of had a bit of currency. I know that they did the same thing with Bride of Frankenstein a couple of years later. So, you know, your bookshops would hopefully have shelves and displays of the story, which people could read in advance of the film. So the novelisation is various names on it, but it's by Delos W. Lovelace. So this is the one that's most often reprinted as a book, and that's what I've read. It's a fine, rollicking adventure. It's a good version of the movie. Clearly, like a lot of novelisations, it's written from material that is close to, but not at or beyond the completion of the movie. So there's odd changes, some wording's different, the name of the boat that goes to the island where Kong lives is different, stuff like that. But it's broadly speaking the same, and it's a short, enjoyable read available in various formats, including Audible. But what I've learned both from Andrew's video and also from reading the Stephen Jones Kong book, which is mainly containing the Edgar Wallace earlier draft screenplay, but also has lots of interesting stuff, is about these other versions of the adaptation. So it's leaving aside the King Clunk cartoon, it's a movie that's adapted in various ways from the outset, including there was a abridged version of the movie story in a pulp magazine called Mystery Magazine with a fantastic cover. Now, I can't find that text exactly, but it was reprinted in the 60s in Famous Monsters of Filmland, which is on the Internet Archive. So I've read the version that's on there, where they sort of mixed in the story, the narrative, with some like lots of stills of the movie and some kind of how the movie was made sort of stuff. But I've also heard that there were some editorial amendments into that one, but pretty close to the film. But that's not all. There was in the Daily Herald, a British newspaper, different version, serialized over a long time. So this was a daily paper. You'd get little chunks each day, and it again Kingsley Long, but not sure which version he was working from. But he brings in, sort of adds some stuff in, like what happens afterwards. There's a little paragraph about a stuffed King Kong being a fairground exhibit and making lots of money for his exploiters. So that was quite good. But that's not all, because there was also a short version in a British paper for boys called Boys Magazine, which I love the way the editor introduces it. So in the issue before the King Kong story appears, your sincere friend, the editor, is saying, "My dear chums, whether you've seen that great film, King Kong, at your local cinema yet or not, you will be enthralled by the breathless story of his adventures, which I have secured for next week. By special arrangement with Radio Pictures Limited, the exploits of Kong will appear in a boy's journal for the first time. In addition to spectacle pictures, the exciting and ingenious ways in which the film was made will also be revealed. Chaps, I know you will agree with me when I say this is a chance of a lifetime for every boy to possess a permanent record of the greatest film ever produced. So I want every one of you to blazon the great news of our Kong souvenir number to all your chums, so that they too can obtain a copy for themselves.
And make us lots of money.
Yeah, shameless. It's like a Kong Ponzi scheme. But that story you can read in this Kong book with illustrations and such, including the Boys Magazine, with which is incorporated PALS, out of the long history of merged publications. Thrilling, breath-stopping, immense, the amazing exploits of a 50-foot jungle monster in New York.
But who wore the spectacles? Did they have a special giant set for King Kong?
They did, yes. They were 50-foot high.
Oh, good. When he got a little bit older.
Yeah, sadly, that's not to be.
It was Beauty killed the beast before he could have his spectacles.
Yeah, although that line doesn't appear in that adaptation. It's got the name of the ship correct, but not that bit. But maybe the chaps would be less interested in the romance angle. I don't know. Anyway, just if you want to read that, it is also in a anthology called Menace of the Monsters, edited by Mike Ashley, published by British Library, that's out at the moment. So that's another way you can read Kong adaptations. So yeah, there's a whole bunch of them. Then, of course, there are the sort of the ever-present temptation to add sequels and prequels. So, like Joe DeVito. This is recent. This is 2005, and you get, I would say, the kind of, as well as some great illustrations by Joe DeVito, you get a pretty interesting story about the kind of things you would probably want to read about if you want more Kong. You know, where does he come from? Were there other Kong creatures? What about those tribal folks that you see in pretty stereotypical savage mode in the movie?
It's
So
bad.
what about
very
them?
bad.
So now you get a whole interesting story about them, and they've got a life and agency and all that kind of stuff. And you also get some sort of sequel stuff as well. So that's quite interesting. And a tip of the hat to Will Murray for his Tarzan versus King Kong book, which is sort of inserted into the original story. So in the movie and in the book, you get a jump from the jungle island where most of the adventure has taken place to New York. It's just 1 minute you're there, 1 minute you're there, which I think cinematically works really well. And I suppose the assumption is that all that happens in between is a load of boring practicalities. How do you get a big ape into a ship and stuff like that? So Will Murray inserts his story into that period of the journey home. And it's really good. Recommend that to Tarzan and or Kong fans or people who like crossovers and team-ups. So yeah, those are my canonical reads. I also read novelisation of the 2005 movie. So there was a 1976 King Kong. I don't think that was novelised, but the 2005 one certainly was. This is the Peter Jackson one that lots of people feel is overlong and has its flaws. I actually enjoyed the book by Christopher Golden, and possibly more than the film. This is set back in the 30s. It's a remake, basically, rather than a sort of reimagining or whatever. Also, talking of sequels, King Kong, The Island of the Skull. Now, I've bought this, haven't read it yet. It's by an author who we hear a lot of in this house. We've heard 27 works by Matthew Costello.
Oh, good
Who
lord!
is the co-creator of a cozy crime series of novellas and audio books called the Cheringham series.
They're fantastic.
So
forget your Kong, just read the Cheringham ones.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Or listen to Neil Dudgeon reading them.
So without going down a Cheringham rabbit hole at this point, this book is prequel to the King Kong story, but as far as I can see, it hasn't got King Kong in it. So it's a tie-in book without that which is being tied into. It's about the supporting characters who I'm quite invested in them, but I'm not quite sure I can get the energy to read sort of earlier adventures of Carl Denham and Darrow. But who knows? Like I say, it's strangely an author we know a lot of. Okay, that's my Kong stuff up to date. I'll be back with some Kong copies, some pastiches that I've been delving into also. So, yeah, as usual, I'll say back soon with something else.
Spectacles.